Hi, welcome. Yakuza 8 / Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, we'll talk about the naming schemes, don't worry, is coming out January of next year. It is one of my most anticipated games because it shows so much promise in continuing a series that I love so very much. But it's also a series that I've heard many people say that they are afraid to get into, that it's weird or overwhelming or just a little bit too much. So in this video I have two main goals. The first one is to explain all of the reasons that you could love Yakuza, why this series is maybe for you if you're not very aware of what exactly it is. But I'll make sure to also point out some of the reasons why it might not be for you. And the second goal is to explain what I think is the best way to get into the series depending on who you are. Not all of us have the same free time or the same willingness to spend a lot of that free time on a very long running series, but that doesn't mean you can't enjoy it and get caught up to date with much less effort than you might think. So hi, I'm Mugthief, a person that plays too many games and thinks too much about them, and I do that here on my YouTube channel. If you think that at any point during the video I accomplish my goals, hit the like button. It lets me know that I did so, and it also helps this video reach more people, which is what I want. I want people to get into Yakuza. So let's start. What is Yakuza, and what makes it so special? Well, Yakuza is a long-running Japanese video game series about the criminal underbelly of Tokyo and the crime gangs that exist within it. Its biggest selling point, in my opinion, is the fantastic story that it tells, all centered around Kazuma Kiryu, or at least almost all of it, which is a fantastic character. If you're a fan of crime drama with long setups and amazing payoffs for those setups, if you like stories of betrayal, revenge, mystery, secrets, and intrigue, stories of companionship and found family, you will like Yakuza. But I know that that's not necessarily the most unique or the most special thing. There has to be something else here, and there is a lot of it. And something that can initially be a little disorienting, Yakuza is much more than a crime drama. It's also a vehicle for all sorts of crazy, fun stories with a lot of comedy. That comedy manifests in both the main storylines and the main characters, but also a lot through the sub-stories, which are basically side quests in the game. This is something that, from my ignorance, I think a lot of Asian media does. Especially watching K-dramas in the last year, I've noticed that they don't really stick to a formula. Initially, that can be very shocking and even cause a little bit of whiplash as you're going from dire circumstances to funny vignette, but it is something that Yakuza does, and it does very well. The comedy here runs the gamut, everywhere from character comedy to wild slapstick to playful commentary and thoughtful but funny commentary as well. For something that on the surface looks like a game about crime, you will spend a lot of your time in these side stories, and they are some of the best parts of these games and some of the most memorable. Things like How to Train a Dominatrix, where you help out a very shy dominatrix who wants tips to be assertive from a hardened Yakuza, or helping a man in a public toilet get some toilet paper. You could solve a whodunit murder mystery, or stop a new mobile phone AI that wants to take over the world. Or you could help a down-on-his-luck homeless man to get his life together because he wants to ask out a girl from the soup kitchen. You could also participate in an extreme carding league filled with larger-than-life personalities and rivalries. And this is just really scratching the surface of the wacky misadventures that you can get into in the Yakuza series. They won't be for everyone. Some might make you uncomfortable. Some might make you cringe. Some of them just have a cultural barrier that is difficult for people to get through, including myself. But over time, and especially in their majority, they're all fantastic. They're always either heartfelt stories, laugh-out-loud funny, or wildly creative and surprising. So even though it might seem like, oh, so random, what a dumb list of things you just said, but Kiryu and the supporting cast ground all of it, and that makes it all click. Because when something is absurd, it's not just absurd and exists, it's absurd to the characters as well. So you feel like a passenger along for the crazy ride with Kiryu or the others looking at you and being like, what have we gotten ourselves into? And that makes it all the more special. Each of these characters is so endearingly well written that it's the reason that when they show up again later in future games, you're so excited to see them. So wait, before I talk about that more, first, if you like constant surprises and often playing through funny situations that channel a lot of classic RPG side quest energy, you're gonna love Yakuza. With that out of the way, let's talk about showing up again. One of the most unique things about Yakuza as a series is not only how long running it is, but how it takes that long running fact and turns it into a critical part of its identity. There's no better example of this than where most of the games take place. Kamurocho, a criminal neighborhood in Tokyo, famous for its gambling, its clubs, and its crime. You might think that having all of these games take place in the same location would make that location boring and stale, but not only do you end up traveling to a lot of other places and other areas being opened up throughout the neighborhood itself, as well as in other areas that you explore, it's actually one of the selling points that you keep coming back to Kamurocho. The Yakuza games mostly take place in-game in the same year that they were released, so you get to experience Kamurocho through all of these years and the characters that live in it as well. The open world that Yakuza takes place in might be small, but it's intensely detailed. Every little corner meaningful and with things to observe, and because of that, coming back and back again makes you notice even the tiniest differences. This is one of those games where you will stop using the map pretty quickly, especially if you're playing through multiple of the entries in a row. Eventually, that means going to Kamurocho feels a little bit like home, like maybe a home you haven't been to in a while, and observing all of those tiny details and what is the story of the different people that stayed behind means so much more to you. I love games that explore the same place throughout time. I always come back to an example that I just can never let go of, which is Bully by Rockstar, where taking place in a school academy and a town, the game unfolds throughout a full school year. So you get to experience the game divided into 4 chapters, one for each of the seasons. And watching the school change in its decorations and the students change in their outfits as different plot points advance made it feel like a place that I cared about. It made it feel so much more lived in than any random clutter that you can put into a room ever can. And while Yakuza doesn't do that in the same game, it does that throughout the series, and it's something that I really enjoy about them. Now, you don't need to play all of the Yakuza games to enjoy the lovely locations that they portray and the detail that they're done with. But if you do decide to play more than one of the games that takes place in Kamurocho, you will enjoy this. However, if you love open world games that focus on very small, very detailed locations with a lot to see and explore and content crammed into it, you're gonna love Yakuza. But let's talk about the first part that comes with a warning of why you might not like it. What do you do in Yakuza games? Well, the simple answer is that it's a brawler, a third-person brawler, like in the PS2 style, which is when these games came out originally. It's a brawler that continuously evolves as the series evolves, adding meters and spenders and contextual combos and using different parts of the environment, as well as just a ton of other mechanics on top of all of that to make that combat deeper and deeper as the series continues. But it's never really all that deep. It's definitely not deep enough to carry how long these games are for their entire length, which they don't, because that's not the main point of Yakuza, at least for me. Most of what you do in Yakuza is walking around, running around, and interacting with different characters, engaging in different quests, watching cutscenes, different dialogue, and different special things that happen related to those events, be they mini-games or challenges or all sorts of things. I've never really calculated how much of the time you spend in these games brawling versus other stuff, but I'm very confident in saying that the other stuff makes up more of it. So yeah, there's some brawling, and if you like brawling, what's here is good, but you're also going to spend a lot of time slot car racing and playing classic arcade games and kart racing and fishing and property management thing. Never thought I would say that sentence. If you're here for just combat gameplay, you're gonna find these games frustrating because that's not what the biggest part of them is. If you like the idea of that combat being in between a lot of experiencing cool stories and unique events, then you're gonna love Yakuza. Except that now it's no longer a brawler. Now it's a turn-based, party-based RPG. Since Yakuza 7, which is the 8th mainline game subtitled Like a Dragon, which is now the name of the series moving forward, including Like a Dragon 8, Infinite Wealth, the games are now turn-based RPGs for the mainline series, which Like a Dragon 8 is the 9th one. I see why people could be confused, but it's not that. We're gonna dive into this in a second. In a move that shocked some, delighted few, and then progressively delighted more and more, till I think it's pretty exceptionally well received, Yakuza is now a turn-based RPG. Yakuza 7 upends most of the series, because not only does it change the core gameplay style here, but it also throws away Kiryu and brings in Kasuga Ichiban, the new main character of the series. It also does away with Kamurocho, which, although it does show up in the game along with a lot of other areas, it's mostly centered on Yokohama. But these games were never really about the combat. They were about all of the stories that were told, so they actually kind of already fit that RPG mold. And it makes a lot of sense to take what used to be kind of good but very simple brawler sections that worked as RPG encounters in the middle of the story and just make them turn-based RPG combat. And it leans heavy into classic influences with different classes that you can choose from, different abilities and loot and different unlockables. It also functions as an active RPG, so that's kind of like the Mario RPGs where if you time a button press with your attack while you're doing it, you will do extra damage, or some special abilities come with small button sequences or mini games that you have to play to maximize your damage, as well as the ability to time your button presses to reduce damage on incoming attacks or even dodge them or counter them. It's really good, if a bit simple. But Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, the sequel is looking to expand on that and refine it. And even just from what we see in gameplay and the demo, it looks like they're doing an incredibly good job at it. And I'm so excited because, for as simple as the combat is in Yakuza 7, I really enjoyed it. And I would like this system, specifically this system, to be more fleshed out. And that's what's happening. The other really big change that comes with this is that the story isn't just Kasuga's anymore, because being a party-based RPG, you have 6 other party members, and going around with this crew of personalities leans into the things that I love the most about Yakuza, because all of those crazy events and all of the drama and all of the hype is just exponentially more everywhere, because you get to experience it and interact with all of these different characters that are now core to the story and experience it alongside you. Along with the typical things like specific side quests for certain companions and getting to know them better and understanding them when you all freak out at the crazy stuff that happens in this side quest. And it has this atmosphere of classic RPGs perfectly blended with the heartfelt, off-the-wall craziness that is Yakuza. But this also means that it's a great starting point. If you don't want to deal with all of the things that came before it, yes, the new Yakuza game brings back Kazuma Kiryu, and that's a big deal. But you can start at 7. Don't let people tell you otherwise. Are you going to miss out on a lot of callbacks and a lot of little stuff that mentions previous things? Yes, but it's also a completely new story or a completely new character in a new area and with a new gameplay system. It's clearly intended for people to start there if they want to, and I think it's a fantastic experience without any prior knowledge. So at the very least, play Yakuza 7, Like a Dragon, so that you can play Like a Dragon 8, Infinite Wealth. But if you're a person, like me, that just can't get into a series unless you know everything that came before, I'm here to help you out. One of the options is to just watch summaries, and there are many different summaries on YouTube. From long 4-hour analysis pieces on each of the games to 2-hour summaries of the entire story. And they will fit your needs depending on how deep you want to go. I do think these stories are fantastic, and of course it depends on how these videos summarize and frame them, but they're worth enjoying almost no matter how they're presented. No matter which option you choose, including the very long video essays on each individual one, they will always be shorter than playing through them. But if you want to play through them, let me tell you the most important ones, in my opinion, and the best line to take in order to get caught up. Playing them is easier than ever since RGG, the developers, which stands for a Japanese name that I'm afraid to mispronounce so I won't say it, have made it as easy as they can. They have remastered the first 3 Yakuza games, as well as released in 2015 Yakuza 0, a prequel and the chronological start for the series. And that is where I recommend you start. Yakuza 0 is an incredible game and arguably one of the best ones in the whole series. From there, you could go and play Yakuza Kiwami, Kiwami standing for remaster/remake of 1, 2, and 3. Of them, I think 3 is the weakest, but it's still a very good time. 1 is the worst one, and it's the one where you will feel the biggest shift from the very modernly designed Yakuza 0 to a very old school game in Yakuza Kiwami. And I think you should not, under any circumstance, start at Yakuza Kiwami because it will feel old. The storytelling and the style, the general vibe of the series isn't all the way developed here. It's not really going to be as good as it can be. It's much better if you play Yakuza 0 first, being a highlight that gives you some charm and perspective when going back in time to play the remastered Yakuza Kiwami. If you just don't want to deal with old stuff, and it is one of the simpler stories in the series, you could just get a summary of Yakuza Kiwami 1, and I think Kiwami 2 and 3 are pretty good to play. 2 is my favorite of these 3. 4 and 5 are largely the most skippable ones. A lot of people had problems with the main antagonist and with a lot of the story plots and maybe a little lack of evolution in the series despite the jump in technology. They're still very good stories and very much worth digging into, especially if you play through previous games and you're just in love with what's going on and want to see every step of Kiryu's journey. But if you're short on time or you're not that heavily invested, I would say skip these and go straight to 6 for the one you should play. 6 is a very divisive game, but it's a very good game that's meant to break off from Kiryu and tell the ending to his story, to his main arc. It's one of the shorter Yakuza games as well, which helps if you're trying to catch up fast. But it is also a game that you could just watch a summary of on YouTube. So to summarize the summary, 0 is worth playing very much so, and the highlights of the rest of the series for me are 2 and 6. The rest of them are varying in their degrees of quality, but 4 and 5 are the lowest for me personally. So mix and match, playing or summarizing as you go. Of course, this all leads into 7, which is a great starting point. As I said, you could start here no matter what, but I do recommend that you play 7 no matter what you're doing, because it's the one that ties the most directly into 8, and you're gonna be very excited for that, right? Because I'm making this whole video about why this series is great. So you want to be more intimately familiar and caught up right from the start with all of the goings-on with Kasuga Ichiban. More importantly, 8 not only refines and expands the combat system and not only brings back Kiryu, but takes the series to a completely new location, Hawaii. So we're going to be able to explore another fantastically made, intricately designed space by the wizards at RGG, and I can't wait to spend time with characters I love in a new location filled with potential and an expanded combat system. So really, play 7, even if you don't play any of the other ones. When it comes to spin-offs, things like the Judgment series or the recently released Ishin or Like a Dragon Gaiden, the man who erased his name, those are spin-offs, and while they can fill in some gaps or they kind of mix in the case with Judgment and Ishin. Ishin is kind of like an anthology series. It's like the same characters transplanted to a whole different time period. It's a complete side story. The Man Who Erased His Name is what happens to Kiryu between 6 and 8. And Judgment is just a completely different story, very cool in its own right. It's a different flavor, and it was intended to be the series that would continue with the action brawler side of this whole universe since 7 went in the turn-based direction. But you don't have to care about any of those, and I think those are just really cool things that you can enjoy on their own, or if you're a fan of the series as is. So you can know they exist, but you don't have to think about them. So I hope that in this whole thing, I've explained well enough what Yakuza brings to the table, and how, while it might seem intimidating on the surface, there is plenty of ways to get into it, and plenty of reasons to get into it. It's a series I hold near to my heart, and one of the few long-running series that at this moment in time I think is getting better, and it was already great. So it really is a great time to jump on before Yakuza 8. If you think I did a good job in accomplishing my goals, maybe consider subscribing. We're almost at 10,000 subscribers, which is ridiculous and makes me incredibly happy, although I'm still can't really believe it. I make long video essays and analysis, and I also make shorter consumer-focused reviews, as well as just talking about things that I like in this video, and I'd love to have you along for the ride. If you're here at the end, leave a comment, whatever you want to say, and if you have nothing better to say, just type out, "I suggest you listen to me." You don't get the joke now, but maybe you will one day, and I will heart every single person that puts that down there. I've been Mug Thief, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon.